Slavery was a global institution with diverse forms across continents. For thousands of years, slavery shaped nearly every major civilization on Earth. Entire economies were built on stolen labor. Kings, emperors, merchants, priests, conquerors, and governments all depended on systems that turned human beings into property. Some slaves were captured in war, some were kidnapped, some were born into bondage, others sold themselves just to survive famine or death. Behind every empire and every golden age, there were usually invisible hands forced to build it, starting with Europe, ancient Greece. Ancient Greece is remembered as the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, theater, and Western political thought. But behind that image stood a massive slave system that kept Greek society running. In cities like Athens, slavery was everywhere. At the height of its power, Athens may have held between 60,000 and 80,000 enslaved people, possibly a third of the population. To many Greeks, slavery was not seen as immoral. It was seen as normal. Philosophers like Aristotle even described slaves as living tools, human beings reduced to instruments of labor. Most slaves were foreigners. They came from Thrace, Anatolia, the Black Sea, and other conquered or raided regions. Wars between Greek city-states constantly created captives. Pirates also kidnapped people across the Mediterranean and sold them into slavery. That slavery existed too in earlier periods, where citizens unable to repay debts could lose their freedom. Slave markets operated openly in ports like Beirut and trade centers like Delos. Human beings were bought, sold, and transported as commodities across the ancient world. Greek slavery was mostly urban and domestic rather than plantation-based. Many households owned a few slaves each. Wealthier families owned dozens. Enslaved people cooked, cleaned, raised children, managed workshops, worked as craftsmen, or handled trade. Some were educated enough to serve as tutors, secretaries, nurses, or accountants. Others faced far worse conditions. Athens relied heavily on slave labor in its silver mines at Laurium. These mines were hellish. Men, women, and children worked underground for long hours in toxic conditions, chained to exhausted labor that helped fund Athens' military and cultural golden age. Sparta operated differently. Its economy depended on the Helots, a massive population of state-owned agricultural slaves mainly taken from conquered Messenia. Helots farmed the land while Spartan citizens trained for war. The Spartans feared them constantly. Every year, Spartan authorities formally declared war on the Helots so they could kill rebellious slaves without religious consequences. Fear shaped the entire Spartan system. In Athens, enslaved people had very limited legal rights, though some protections existed. Owners generally could not kill slaves arbitrarily without consequences. Slaves could sometimes marry with permission and participate in limited social life. In some cases, children born to enslaved women were considered free under the Athenian customs, though realities vary widely. Women in slavery often worked inside homes as servants or concubines. Men were more likely to perform manual labor, mining, or skilled trade. Daily life depended heavily on the owner. Some domestic slaves lived relatively stable lives close to their masters. Others endured brutal exploitation with no protection at all. Large slave revolts were rare in Greece, but resistance still existed. Slaves escaped, sought refuge in temples, sabotaged labor, or fled during war and political chaos. Sparta especially lived in constant fear of Helot uprisings, which erupted repeatedly across its history. Freedom was possible, though limited. Owners could manumit slaves as reward through religious ceremony or by allowing them to purchase freedom. Freed people remained socially inferior. but some built independent lives afterward. Greek civilization, its architecture, philosophy, democracy, and military power rested heavily on the labor of enslaved people. The same society that debated freedom and citizenship excluded huge populations from both. Moving on to ancient Rome. Rome transformed slavery into one of the largest labor systems of the ancient world. As the Roman Republic conquered Italy, North Africa, Greece, Britain, and the Middle East, millions of captives flooded into the empire. Entire wars became engines of human trafficking. Victory meant wealth, land, and slaves. Roman slavery was massive, organized, and deeply woven into everyday life. By the height of the empire, slaves may have made up 10 to 20% of the population. Millions of people spread across cities, farms, mines, villas, ports, and households. Roman law treated enslaved people as property. A slave was not legally a person with rights. They were a thing. Masters held near total authority over punishment, labor, and family separation. Slave auctions were public spectacles where buyers inspected bodies like livestock. Most slaves entered the system through conquest. Roman armies enslaved huge populations after military victories. The destruction of Carthage, the conquest of Greece, Caesar's campaigns in Gaul, and wars in Judea all produced enormous waves of captives. Pirates, kidnappers, and traders also supplied markets. Some children were abandoned and later enslaved. Others were born into slavery. Across the empire, slave labor powered nearly everything. On giant estates known as latifundia, enslaved workers farmed grain, olives, and wine. In mines across Spain and Sardinia, slaves endured some of the deadliest labor in the empire. Others rode galleys, built roads, maintained aqueducts, or worked in workshops and markets. Inside wealthy Roman homes, slaves handled domestic life entirely. They cooked meals, cleaned villas, educated children, managed finances, copied manuscripts, and even acted as physicians or teachers. Elite Romans often owned dozens or even hundreds of slaves as symbols of status and power. Daily life varied drastically. Some educated or skilled slaves lived relatively privileged lives close to elite families. Others suffered endless violence in fields and mines where life expectancy was brutally short. Families existed, but Roman law did not officially recognize slave marriages. Owners could separate husbands, wives, and children at any moment through sale or punishment. Women face constant vulnerability to S-word exploitation. Children born to enslaved mothers automatically inherited slave status, and yet Rome also developed one of the ancient world's largest systems of manumission. Some slaves could earn money through a peculium, a personal fund allowed by masters. Others were free through loyalty, service, or inheritance. Freed slaves, known as liberty, became Roman citizens with limited rights. Some grew wealthy and influential, especially in trade and administration. Still, slavery remained a system of fear. Runaways were hunted aggressively. Branding, chains, torture, and crucifixion were used to terrify enslaved populations into obedience. Rome knew its empire depended on coercion. That fear exploded during the revolt of Spartacus in 73 BC. Spartacus, a gladiator and escaped slave, led tens of thousands in the largest slave rebellion Rome ever faced. For 2 years, rebel armies defeated Roman forces and terrified the public before finally being crushed. Thousands of captured rebels were crucified along Roman roads as a warning. Even after Spartacus, resistance never disappeared. Slaves sabotaged labor, escaped, poisoned masters, and joined outlaw bands across the empire. Roman slavery shaped the empire's economy, politics, and social order for centuries. Even after the Western Roman Empire collapsed, Roman ideas about servitude survived in Europe and influenced later system of labor and hierarchy. Viking Age. The Vikings are often remembered as explorers and sailors, but they were also major slave traders across the Viking world. Enslaved people were known as thralls. Slavery was central to Norse society and economy, especially during the height of Viking expansion. Raiding was not just about gold or silver. Human beings were among the most valuable prizes Vikings could capture. Norse raiders attacked monasteries, villages, towns, and coastal settlements across Britain, Ireland, Francia, the Baltic, and Eastern Europe. Men, women, and children were seized during these raids and transported across Viking trade routes. Slavic populations were especially targeted, so often that the word slave itself likely evolved from the word Slav. Captured people were sold in Viking trading hubs like Hedeby, Dublin, Kaupang, and Novgorod. Others were exported farther south into Islamic markets through river routes connecting the Baltic to the Black Sea and the Abbasid Caliphate. The Viking slave trade linked northern Europe to a wider global economy. In Norse law, thralls occupied the absolute bottom of society. They had almost no right. Masters could beat, exploit, S-word, abuse, or even kill them with minimal punishment. Unlike some Greek systems, Viking slavery was hereditary. Children born to thralls were usually born into slavery themselves. Most thralls worked on farms and in households. They planted crops, tended animals, cooked meals, repaired ships, and built settlements. They handled physical labor that supported Norse expansion. Skilled slaves could become blacksmiths, craftsmen, or workshop laborers. Women faced particular vulnerability. Female thralls were frequently used for domestic labor and concubinage. Norse sagas and historical accounts describe enslaved women being forced into S-word relationships with masters or captors. Children born from these unions were often considered free, though their status depended heavily on local customs. Daily life depended on the owner and location. Some thralls lived integrated into rural households. Others faced brutal isolation and punishment. Resistance existed constantly beneath the surface. Some slaves escaped during voyages or raids. Others fled to churches or rival territories, where Christianity sometimes offered limited protection. Norse sagas even record occasional slave uprisings and acts of revenge against masters. Over time, Christianity slowly weakened the institution. As Scandinavian kingdoms converted and church influence discouraged large-scale slave raiding and pushed society towards serfdom instead. Economic changes also made slavery less central than before. Manumission was possible. A thrall could sometimes buy freedom or be freed by a master. Freed slaves became leysinga, a freedman who entered the lower ranks of free society but still carried social stigma. The Viking slave trade helped build important Norse cities, especially Dublin, which became one of the largest slave trading centers in medieval Europe. Behind the image of fearless explorers stood another reality. Viking expansion was powered not only by ships and swords, but also by chains.